Whakarongo, dein Neuseeland-Podcast.
Hallo zu Whakarongo, eurem Neuseeland-Podcast mit einer sehr, sehr aktuellen Ausgabe. Und dazu stehen euch wie immer zur Verfügung am Mikrofon die wunderbare Rebecca Burke.
Und Daniel Kur.
Hallöchen. Warum sind wir top aktuell? Wir sind top aktuell, weil einigen von euch nicht entgangen sein wird, dass bis vor wenigen Tagen die Rugby-WM in Frankreich stattgefunden hat. Das ist für unseren Podcast nicht ganz unwichtig, Rebecca, weil...
Ja, es ist Rugby, was soll ich sagen?
Das ist die einfache Antwort.
Es ist der Nationalsport schlechthin.
So, das wollte ich von dir hören. Und die All Blacks, die Neuseeländer, sind sehr weit gekommen ins Finale.
Ja.
Mehr möchte ich eigentlich gar nicht sagen.
Ja, 28.10., der Tag X, es war ganz schlimm.
Daraus für den nicht ganz sportinteressierten Laien geht hervor, die All Blacks, dann sagen wir es positiv, sind Zweiter geworden.
Genau, wir sind Zweiter geworden. Wir wären fast Erster geworden. Es war ein spannendes Spiel, es war sehr, sehr gut. Und so haben wir gedacht, wir greifen das Thema Rugby, All Blacks und Sport in Neuseeland heute auf.
Weil das ja wirklich eine riesengroße Bedeutung hat letztendlich. Also wir werden das vertiefen heute mit 2 Gästen, die wir auch schon in der Leitung haben. Wenn es heute ein bisschen anders klingt, nicht wundern. Wir sind per Zoom alle miteinander verbunden. Und I think we should switch in another language.
Yeah.
Not my best part, but it's your turn to introduce our guests.
Yeah, so with us here today is, first of all, Kane Harnett Mutu, a good friend of mine that I'm, for quite a long time friends with now. And he is a Maori New Zealander from Ngati Kahu, that's a tribe up in the Northlands. But maybe, Kane, do you want to introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about you?
Sure. Tēnei te mihi atu ki a koutou e noho ora mai reira e roto tō kainga maha. Ko Kane Harnett taku ingoa. No Aotearoa Wahoo. My name is Kane Harnett Mutu, and I am based in Copenhagen now. But I am originally from a small town in the middle of New Zealand called Taihape. And my tribe is, as Rebecca said, Ngati Kahu, which is at the very top of the North Island of New Zealand.
Yeah, welcome, Kane. Thanks for being with us here. And Kane is a real sports enthusiast and also here in his capacity as an All Blacks expert, I would say. He has been in the support staff around the All Blacks now with the Rugby World Cup and has also been in the stadium during the final, and he will tell us today a little bit about that. But also we have here Marvin Köppen, and Marvin lives up in Hamburg, and Marvin and I, we know each other not that long, actually, just a couple of weeks, but that's really cool. Marv is a real Kiwi New Zealand enthusiast, I would say. He has been there a couple of times, lived there for some periods, and has worked in the fields of sports over there as well. But Marv, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Sure, I'm happy to do that. Hello, everyone. My name is Marvin. I'm from Germany. I'm from Hamburg. But I lived in New Zealand for quite a while. And I'm passionate about sports as well. I like rugby. However, I'm a soccer coach. And I also love other kind of sports. I'm just passionate about that. I'm also passionate about Maori culture. I started learning Te Reo Maori, the Maori language, back in 2020. I think I'm still a beginner though. However, I really like it to learn. And thanks for having me here today.
Nice to have you here.
Yeah, nice to have you, Marv. I think your reo is better than mine though.
Oh, maybe. Maybe. No,
I'm really struggling.
No tia mana hao engari ke Aotearoa huki hao e noho ana. So I'm here in Germany, but I lived in New Zealand for a while.
So you can do the kupu of the day at the end of the podcast, maybe.
Nice idea.
Well, kapai, I could, yeah.
So think about that. So maybe let's get started a little bit. So who of you guys watched the game? The bad game, the serious game?
And how do you feel now?
How do you feel now? Exactly.
Well, I'll start. Yeah, but Actually, I feel totally okay about it. Surprisingly, I think basically the last 10 weeks I've been traveling to and from France on a weekly basis. So my role has been with the All Blacks for the last 5 years, working with the corporate sponsors and with our corporate partners. So my role is as a cultural advisor to our sponsors and our partners, helping them to understand and work within understanding the legacy of the All Blacks, but also understanding how to integrate sort of Māori elements into their promotions and their marketing work. So basically, I've been doing it now with Adidas, and prior to Alfred, which are our new sponsor, I've been doing it with AIG for the last 5 years. But no, it was interesting. I think I was at the Ireland game as well, which was the quarterfinal, which was a difficult one for us, because I think no one really expected the All Blacks to beat Ireland, because Ireland was the number one team in the world. And if you went back and looked at our record over the last year, you would think that certainly Ireland was the big favourites. But one thing that you should always understand about New Zealand is that as long as we're on the field, we always have a chance. We don't believe in giving up. We're going to go until the final whistle. We always have a chance to win a game, and effectively that's what happened. And New Zealand was able to beat Ireland to get us through to the semi-final, where we played Argentina, and we had a good win over Argentina, and then that took us to the final against South Africa. But I think as a spectacle, it was a wonderful spectacle. France did an amazing job. It was absolutely fantastic being in France, seeing all the teams, especially some of the smaller teams like Portugal and Romania, who were absolutely amazing. Like they played so well, and it gives really great credence to the future for rugby on a worldwide basis, especially now that at the next World Cup there's going to be 24 teams playing. So it's going to change the whole viewpoint again. But as a New Zealander, I'm gutted. I can't hide that. I'll always be gutted. It was also really hard to see the boys after the game. They were emotionally exhausted. It was kind of sad to say, for a lot of the boys as well, who were a few of our great players who were leaving or were heading off to play who were retiring or heading off to play in other countries. It was a bit of a bitter pill for them to take, but they're professionals, and we're never going to win. That's the thing now. We're never going to win all of our games, but losing the World Cup final, that's a toughie. It's a tough one.
Mm. Yeah, I was in an Irish pub watching the game, and believe me, it was full of South Africans here in the middle of Essen, which was weird. But there were a couple of German All Blacks fans at least, so we huddled up and watched the game, and it was very noisy, but real fun. And as well, at the end of the game, everyone was hugging and still giving support to each other, cheering for the South Africans. So I guess it's kind of a different fan culture in a way around rugby. That's at least how I feel about it.
Well, I think one of the things that's really different between New Zealand and South Africa is obviously the size. South Africa's 65 million or something like that, and New Zealand's 5 million in total. So New Zealand always punches above its weight in any sport. We're a very small country, but we have so much talent, and within that talent, we have a mindset and an attitude which basically goes through every sport in New Zealand. We despite our size, we're still strong enough and good enough to win. And I think that that we see in South Africa, for example, that what it meant to the people of South Africa, because South Africa, despite the fact that they've been out of international isolation since 1993, they're still struggling with a lot of social things, and also South Africa is probably our greatest rival in rugby, and so to lose to them obviously it's a bitter pill for us to take. But on the other side, if someone's going to beat us, then we want to lose to the best team. We want to lose to the best team, and And South Africa proved that they were at this Rugby World Cup. They were absolutely the best team, and they deserve their victory.
Definitely. Marv, where did you watch the game?
And how do you feel?
Well, I have to say, I watched the game at home. I thought about going to a pub here in Hamburg, and there are a few groups on social media like Kiwis in Hamburg, and then I think what they usually do, they organize themselves and then they go to a Irish pub here in Hamburg, and I thought about joining, but I don't know, wasn't sure about that, so I just watched it by myself. Sometimes I have to say I enjoy that because I can focus more and it's easier for me to follow the game. When you're in the pub, it's great because there's a crowd and people celebrating. But I'm also a coach, not a rugby coach, like a soccer coach. But I always say we coaches, we have maybe sometimes a different kind of angle to watch the game. And it's easier for me to do that when I'm at home. Yeah, I found the game quite intense, I have to say. I think it wasn't the best game. However, it was very intense, and I had the feeling that South Africa followed quite a strategy just to defend, and it wasn't easy for the All Blacks just to play the usual game, what they usually play. I remember the first game against France, and I was impressed how France played like the opener game when they beat the All Blacks. But I had the feeling, I don't know, but I had the feeling it was like a wake-up call for the All Blacks, because after that they played amazing, and you just mentioned how they beat Ireland, and there was a very intense game as well. So yeah, I was gutted, of course. I always hope that the All Blacks win, but yeah, I think South Africa is a special rugby nation as well. So yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I had the same thing. I was sitting at home and I said, I'm actually tired, and maybe I just watch it at home. I have a big screen here. I can sit on the sofa with a bag of chips. Great. And then I thought, now, it's like the chance. And then I said, okay, let's go down to the pub. And if there is no Kiwi around, then we just leave in halftime and we go back home, because this is what we could manage distance-wise. I said, then we watch the other half at home. But then I came in there and there was heaps of screens and good fun. So that was the only game that I watched outside of my house, to be honest. Because for most of the games, I had my kids around here, which was really funny for them, because it was the first time they consciously watched Rugby World Cup with me. And so it was for them somehow a way to connect to their Kiwi part, to their Kiwi culture, which is difficult to keep if you're that far away from home. And so my daughter was constantly giving running commentaries, pretty much like, look, Mom, he's hitting the other one. Oh, no, that one fell over. And my son was like, yeah, he's running. He's the best player. And he got so excited, jumping up and down on the sofa. It was hilarious. And I felt that rugby is sort of a game that even if you're not grasping all the rules, and I must admit there's so many rules and stuff, I do not even know all of them. Some I do, some I understand. But basically, I think it's a game that's a family game as well to watch, and it's quite fun to watch because it's so fast and there's lots happening on the field, even that it's a complex kind of sport.
Yeah, I think one of the things that came out of this World Cup was the influence of the technical referees.
Yeah,
the bunker. And the thing is that irrespective of how people think the referee played, I actually think Wayne Barnes had a really good game. Who was referee for the game? I think he did his very, very best under the circumstances. There was a lot of influence from the technical referees who were constantly basically coming in and even second guessing his decision making. And that's something that obviously that World Rugby needs to look at. But apart from that, I totally agree with Marvin. It's the game itself was incredibly intense, although it wasn't particularly a great game to watch. But the thing about rugby now is rugby isn't just about one type of play.
Yeah.
It's like with any sport, you're going to see different types of philosophies and strategies, and also in South Africa's case, innovation. The way they had their reserves set up this time for a World Cup final, really indicated how they wanted to play. New Zealand understood that, and I think we managed to keep them under control for the majority of the game. But yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of things we can learn from it. There's also a lot of things that, for example, now will change, obviously, because we're going to be having a whole new generation of players coming into the All Blacks with a brand new coach who actually starts today. So we're going to be looking at a completely different era for the future. So that's going to be interesting to see. But I think that it's really important to give thanks, and also to be grateful for our coach Ian Foster. I think what he did was he created a team that just loves him, like they absolutely love him.
He's so calm.
He's so calm, but yeah, he's so calm, and Jason Ryan and Joe Schmidt, and they've got guys, they've got coaches who basically they're not only incredibly talented when it comes to understanding the ins and outs of the game, but they're also incredible people persons. The two things, which is the main ethos of the All Blacks, one is to always ensure that you leave the jersey in a better place than when it came. So your focus is always about incremental improvement, making sure that you're getting better, making sure that you're upholding the mana or the prestige of the jersey of the team. And the second thing, which is the most important part, is bring your authentic self to the field.
Yeah.
So, and I think that Ian Foster provided a platform where players within the structure of the gameplay were also able to bring the best of themselves individually. So they were able to express themselves in a manner that felt natural and authentic to them. And I think we're not going to win every game like we used to. Like gone are the days where teams are going to have a 93% winning rate. We're down at the moment. I think under Ian Foster, we're down to 77%, which still in a professional era in any sport is amazing. But the thing is that in international sport and professional sport, you're not going to win every single game. And so the idea, and we can also see how that's changed the way that we can also see that the way that's changed the way all of the all the people watching the game and have now understand how to go. And I think it also helps, because Rebecca, you remember too, back when you were living in New Zealand, like basically if the All Blacks lost back then, like the country would just go into mourning. We'd stop, everything would stop for a day, and people would basically it'd be like a funeral. But we don't have that.
Their wounds.
Yeah, but we don't have that anymore. We're sad, but we also understand that the difference between the top teams now, like we had 6 teams or 7 teams that could have won the World Cup this year. I mean, that's the first time that's ever happened.
Yeah.
That's ever happened in the history of the tournament. So yeah. So it's but I think that that coming back to what we were talking about before is like in any sport, and as Marvin would say also as well, like even like the soccer as well, it really comes down to man management. It comes down to being able to manage your team, being able to build a environment, and to build a sort of a purpose for the team together. And then letting each individual person attach to it in a manner that's authentic for them, so that they can play the way they play.
Yeah, definitely. Marvin, do you think there is a difference in like coaching in New Zealand or coaching over here, like cultural wise, and like how players or youth that you've trained perceive coach advice and stuff?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, when I started, I realized quickly that the conditions in New Zealand obviously are different from those here in Germany. Not really the way the people play. It's more like the way I would talk to the players, because especially here in my area in Hamburg, I grew up quite straightforward, quite direct. When I talk to a person, it's just a normal thing here. And when I started coaching in New Zealand, I had to changed that a bit after a while because I realized it didn't work so well. We had a few like kind of misunderstanding at the beginning, and I think Kiwis, they kind of sometimes anyway, they talk more in circles, I always say, while here in Germany, I would just point out the problem direct and straightforward. And New Zealand also is very polite. I don't want to say it's not polite here in Germany, but it's just a different way to approach. So, that was different for me at the beginning, but I learned quite fast, I would say. And after a while, it worked out quite well, yeah.
It's the Kiwi way, isn't it? You need to be always polite, and then you get where you want to go.
Yeah, you can't kick asses that way you can here in Germany. Nah, but I think in general, it took me a while to get in. But yeah, I think it's funny because now sometimes when I'm here and talk to players or people in general, I realize I changed a bit. I'm a bit more. I kind of found the Kiwi in me, and sometimes in some situations I like that, and I miss that kind of culture because sometimes when I have a problem here, for example, at my mahi, my work. Oh, what are you doing, mate? That's not good. While in New Zealand, it's more relaxed and more calm, and yeah, I like that.
I've had I've similar to you, Marvin. I think that beginning of last year, I was working with Bayern München, and the interesting thing for me was that in the All Black camp, it's probably a little bit different. I think also because when you're talking high performance, you're also talking about working on small incremental improvements, as I said before, and like the culture within the All Blacks is very it's direct but with empathy. So so basically, there's nothing that's off the table. Like you can talk about anything, and it's done in a manner that provides a safe space for the players and also for the coaches to interact. But there's no doubt that that when you come into the All Blacks, the coaches don't spend any time on motivation at all, because basically the key feeling for the coaches is that, like, if you've made the All Blacks, you're pretty motivated anyway. So
will be good though.
So the focus is on relationships. The focus is on interaction. The focus is on team culture, ensuring taking care of the players, taking care of the people that are outside you. So they spend a lot of time actually on. They spend a lot of time doing things that are fun, and so I think that for a lot of people who don't understand sort of like what it's like to be in a in a high performance team, it can be quite confronting, because as Marvin said, like in New Zealand, like we are very relaxed about the way that we approach things, and we do tend to talk in circles, unless it's something, for example, which is really, really important. If it's really important, New Zealanders have a tendency to be able to get to the challenge straight away, find a solution, and we agree very quickly. I mean, we saw that during the earthquakes. We saw that during a lot of the flooding. We saw it during the flooding, like last year as well. New Zealanders will just basically, if there's a challenge, like we'll step up. We don't even think about it. We'll take that step, and then we'll work it out together, because we understand that that everybody that's there and everybody that's focused on that goal has the same aim of trying to solve it, but in a manner that's to the most benefit of everybody involved. And I think that's a general sports thing now we're starting to see. It was interesting listening to Siya Kolisi, the captain from South Africa, that how he was using like the idea of in New Zealand with this thing called there's a process called legacy, and within that legacy there's 12 points that are identified as being the key main elements or goals for the All Blacks. And interestingly, listening to one of the interviews, I heard Siya Kolisi give 3 of those things as part of what he was talking about as part of the South African culture. So it permeates through through all other sports. And like I took those 12 points and took them into Bayern München as well. And the interesting thing was that despite the fact that, you know, we're talking about a team that has a very strong history and a very strong some cultural basis for who they are as a club, they were still surprised about some of the ways that, you know, that they can actually go even deeper into that culture and actually celebrate celebrate new players coming to the team, but also, you know, also celebrating players that, for example, have learned a lot from Bayern Munich and have actually gone on to success in other clubs. Because, you know, in anything, like if you focus on the idea of what you give to a person, and if the idea being that they should always pass that on, that's the ethos of a good ancestor, is that you always should pass on the things that you learn. And you know, but in professional sport, you know, often as soon as a player leaves the environment, we basically forget them. We try to forget them and just move on to the new player. But the reality is that, you know, these players, when they go out into the world, you know, sometimes the most important thing is like they have those memories of being part of the club, and they will always be part of the club. They'll always be part of the team, no matter what happens. And so you should celebrate that. And if you celebrate that, then it keeps the positivity. It keeps the purpose of a oneness together. And I think that's what we're starting to see in professional sport now. The idea that despite the fact that a player may only be there for a short time, during that short time, their role still is to be a good ancestor and to pass on the knowledge that they have on to the players that are in the team. But also when they leave, that they still take that knowledge with them and they pass it on to the new space. And that's very, very new in professional sport. But it's really exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Marv, do you think that is a cultural thing? Like, in a way, is it in soccer the same? That's what I'm wondering. Like, when I look at the professional soccer players in Germany, do they still feel that connected to their past clubs?
I think it depends, really. You know, I think there are still some players. They share quite a legacy with one team. You know, like they play there for like 10 or maybe even 15 years. But the problem is, in capitalism, I always say, it's getting more and more a thing of the past, because nowadays, especially in soccer, in my opinion, the players, they get way too much money offered, you know, like especially now with Arabia also, and the US market, China, you know, it's crazy what they earn. So and that makes it tricky for them to say, no, I don't take all that money. I stay with my club, the club I love, the club who invested so much for me. And obviously some do. Some say, no, you can't buy me. I play here because that's my heart, that's my whānau, that's my family, and I just stay here. However, I realize more and more that many players, they just change the club every 2, 3, 4 years, you know, just get a new contract, sign a new contract, get more money. And it's quite sad though, because in the past, especially in the 90s and the 80s, it was way more common to play for one club for a longer period of time. And I think all that money is like a poison for the sports, because the commitment isn't the same anymore. And actually you should have other reasons than only money for playing football or rugby, you know, because that's a passion at the end, and you should play with your heart and not always for your next big offer, your next big deal.
We've had like one of the things that's been a big draw for our players in New Zealand. There's two things. The first is that the pathway to the All Blacks was only through playing in New Zealand. So if you're playing offshore, even if you were a current All Black who was on a sabbatical, going and playing in Japan or in France or wherever you might want to play, you have to still return to New Zealand to play for a New Zealand club, to play for a New Zealand franchise, to make it into the All Blacks. And so that was the first thing. But the second thing was also that the black jersey itself has such a strong pull. You know, even like when I was younger, like the idea of being an All Black was a motivating factor for getting up and going out onto a running barefoot onto a frosty park to play rugby at 8:00 on a Saturday morning in the middle of winter. But the idea was that the thing they'd say is, the coach would always say is, if you want to be an All Black, you have to do this. And for kids my age, that was the motivation. It wasn't so much about playing with their friends. It was always about the All Blacks. That was the big motivating factor. And it wasn't until you started getting a little bit older and you started understanding the value of working in a team environment, working together, cooperation, that you sort of understood what was so great about team sport. But even now, where New Zealand isn't so monocultural in relation to sport any longer. We have so many sports that are doing so well on an international basis. And the difference between rugby and rugby league, for example, where we're getting the best players are not necessarily coming to rugby. They're going to rugby league. But we've also, like within the women's sports now, we're seeing also with our netball teams that the level of our netball teams is slightly beginning to drop because a lot of the younger women who would normally play netball, who are so talented, they're moving over to touch and then into rugby, because rugby is now a professional pathway. And also, like in Australia now, they have the women's rugby league, which is huge. So there's lots of different options. And just as a side point, one of the interesting things, this is the first time this has ever happened too, was last Sunday they had the World Rugby Awards, and the winner of the Sevens Female Player of the Year was a woman by the name of Tyler Nathan-Wong. And Tyler has played for New Zealand in the sevens, in the women's seven space now for about just over 10 years. But she's actually not playing sevens anymore. She's actually playing rugby league now in Australia. So interestingly enough, I think she's going to come back to the sevens to try for the sevens for the Olympics next year. But I think that's just showing that now there's a lot more crossover, and we're seeing crossover as being part of that developmental pathway. And so I think that's what we're like. Prior to we started live here on the podcast, Marvin and I were discussing the idea that for rugby players, they can learn so much from playing soccer, because the skills that they learn in soccer, provide them with a really strong base that they can transfer into rugby. But it's exactly the same the other way around. Is that I think that if you learn to play rugby, what it does is it makes you more robust when you move into soccer, for example. And then obviously the skill sets are very different. But I think the physicality that we see from New Zealand teams comes from the idea is that they cross code all the time. They move from one sport to another sport, and they take on board all of that experience. And I think that's what makes us so dangerous on the international arena, is that we do that. And like even here in Denmark, and also my experiences in Germany, with the fact that a lot of the younger players, a lot of younger people, they don't necessarily play 5 or 6 sports when they're a kid. They'll play maybe 1 or maybe 2 if they're lucky. But like in New Zealand, kids play 5 or 6 sports every week. And I think that's probably the reason why we're so lucky that with the small population that we have, that we're able to be so relevant on the international stage. Yeah.
So you would say this is a different kind of sports culture in New Zealand, and younger people get involved in a different way to sports. As you said, they have more than one sport that they are doing. Can you tell us a little bit about how rugby is so big connected with the culture? As I don't know if it's right to say so, but all that I recognize is that there are connections.
Yeah. Marvin, maybe you can talk a little bit about your experiences in Rotorua, because obviously Rotorua being the cultural capital of New Zealand, as sort of in relation to the Māori culture, but also just it would be interesting to hear your views on how what we call whānau-based sport, where everybody basically is involved as a community. I'd be really interested to hear, what your experiences were about that.
Yeah, sure. I think that's quite important, because my impression is that in New Zealand, you just said that quite well, it is not so much about performance from the first day you join a team. It's more about participation. That's a big value. You can play rugby, you can play netball, you might play soccer at the same time. And that's completely fine because it's just about the sports, really. It's about fun, it's about whānau, it's about coming together. While here in Germany, when I grew up, it was quite common to focus quite early on one sport, and then you tried to do it on a high level. Like, for example, you decided for soccer or tennis, basketball, whatever. And as soon as you decided for a sport, it was quite clear that you had to give heaps, you had to really perform, otherwise you wouldn't play. And I think here in Germany, the problem is they put high pressure on young players quite early. Instead of like giving them enough time to develop, and just have fun. Because I think, especially for rangatahi, that's the main thing. They should enjoy sports. And I think in New Zealand, the atmosphere is better for that because the kids have time. There's not so much pressure. This is something I really learned also for my time now here. It's more like about the whole development instead of, okay, we need to win the next game. Obviously, that's a great consequence if you do. However, it's not a shame if you lose, because at the end, you had time together on the pitch and you learned something anyway. And I think this is something here in Germany and Northern Europe, this is something we can really adapt and learn from New Zealand culture, because I think many young players, they are quite talented, but because there's so much high pressure, they might get afraid, and they will never really be able to play their best game.
There is high pressure, as you said, and also, as you said, there is a lot of money behind the whole sports. I think that this is that belongs together.
Yeah. I mean, when I was in Rotorua and I started coaching the team, I arrived with high expectations, and a few players, they came and said, "Hi, I would like to play." And at the beginning, I was like, "Okay, show me something." And the truth is, I thought, okay, they will never make it. I better tell them. I better say, sorry,
Not the Kiwi way.
not this time. I didn't. It's just what I thought, and obviously I have kind of whānau there, and I shared my thoughts every evening, and then they kind of trained me what to say and what to do and take it a bit easy. And yeah, it really changed though. And I had many, at least 50% Maori players in my team. I mean, Rotorua, we all know, is like a big base for the Maori culture, and there are so many great values around. And that was also interesting for me, because at the beginning I had the feeling these guys, they didn't accept me as a coach. They didn't like it, that I don't know what it was, maybe because I was from Germany, or I had just a different style to talk, a different way to train. And I remember one thing, after a while, after a few weeks, we lost a few games, and I had the feeling, okay, I have to change something. So I remember I just made a circle on the pitch, and I just talked to the team, and I just said, I realized I might did wrong, the way I communicated here, but I'm happy that you are here, and I'm happy that we can share this journey together. And for me, it doesn't matter if you Maori or Pākehā or whatever, we are here on the pitch and we just want to proceed and have a good time. And I had the feeling that was really like a kind of game changer somehow, because the Maori players in particular, afterwards, they had a different way. I think I had the feeling they invested more and they enjoyed it more, and actually they were the players who kind of won the next couple of games. So it was quite interesting for me. It was a great learning.
And you're seeing also something. Oh, sorry, please.
What I was just going to say is that we're seeing also that the idea of talent at the beginning isn't necessarily, like, for example, if you go in the United States and you're looking at scouts. I just watched a movie recently about a biography about a scout who scouted for. He started as a high school scout, and then he went to a college scout and became an NBA scout for football. And what he actually said was actually quite true, was the fact that the players that were the most talented in the beginning aren't necessarily the ones who are going to make it in the long run, because talent is only going to take you so far. And I think that the idea is what we've always had in New Zealand with Māori players specifically, is that they're just natural ball players. They're very, very talented. But what we have had, unfortunately, has been we've had a lack of long-term motivation, because once they get past that sort of 17, 18, 19-year-old, whether in the school system, and then they have to leave school and then go into, they have to go and work, the pressures of finances and money and then new families and all that sort of thing starts to come in. So the idea of actually being more disciplined and being more focused and motivated, becomes no prioritized. And so therefore, so when they begin to play, they may have had a great talent at school, but the talent isn't really refined because of their financial situation or their cultural background. But what we're actually seeing now is completely the opposite. We're giving these young players time to mature and to grow, and you're seeing also like a lot of players, like for example Josh Lord, who is on the periphery. He'll come back into the All Blacks in the lock position in the next rotation, but he didn't start playing rugby until he was like 18. So he played basketball and soccer, and then he just decided he wanted to play rugby, and so then he changed over to rugby. But we're seeing more and more of this sort of a time where players are developing that skills and motivation in other sports, and then maybe coming to rugby, or if they're starting in rugby, then going to basketball or going to something else, because we have that ability to cross over. But I think one of the things that probably it's always going to set New Zealand aside from any other country is the fact that we're able to take on, we're not afraid to take on advice from other countries or from other coaches, and we see that all the time. Even though the All Blacks themselves have only ever been coached by a New Zealander, the reason that's only been coached by a New Zealander is the fact that we have it's like an intellectual property, and when if you're putting something out into the world, you want to make sure that it's presented in a manner that's authentic to New Zealand. And I think we've had opportunities to take on international coaches before, but what's interesting is that you have coaches like, for example, the Crusaders, which is the team from Christchurch in New Zealand. They're the most winning rugby team in world history. They're unbelievable. They're an unbelievable team, but they had a coach who came from Ireland called Ronan O'Gara, and he's basically a legend in Irish rugby. And when Ronan came to New Zealand, he basically, he wanted to come and learn, why the Crusaders were so successful. But the reality at the end of the day is that, the Crusaders could have said, no, we're not going to let you come, because you're going to take that information back and use it against other New Zealand teams or against the All Blacks in a few years' time. But what they did was they just embraced him, because they also realized that, that they could learn a lot from him. So the idea of being able to pass information from one to the other, and from one coach to another coach, but also from one environment to another environment. And we actually saw that during the World Cup, as teams were coming out, as teams were losing in the quarterfinals or in the semifinals, they were actually passing on information, from to the All Blacks and to other teams, saying, hey, this was our experience against that team. This is what we saw. This is what we thought. Maybe this is something you could be useful for you in your research against when you have to come up against these teams. So intellectual property in rugby is nowhere near as secret or as clandestine or as it used to be in the past, because with video refereeing and with video capture, everything is available there to you. But culture is something that's always going to be the underlying foundation of any type of success. And the fact that we have in New Zealand, we have that it's such a multicultural culture in New Zealand. That's our strength, and that will always be our strength, because we have the ability to adapt, to learn, to awhi, to support people of any race, religion, or background. If you give to the team, or you give to the community will also embrace you and take you back. So and you're never standing alone. You're always standing, because we're only a small country. So you're always standing together with others, and that's something that we're very, very proud of, and that will always be the base of our culture, I think.
Yeah, I think that was a good point, though. I had so many learnings because of that, because I remember my expectations were high because I just had that different point of view. And obviously, I had so many problems at the beginning, like commitment was a big thing, what you just mentioned, like it was difficult to motivate the players to join the training. It was like on a high school level. However, I had the feeling the kids were keen, they really wanted, but there are so many things involved, like the parents, and I don't know, school obviously is more important. And that was tricky for me to always make sure, okay, the people come, the players are coming, we have enough to, I don't know, play 4 against 4 on the pitch. And it wasn't really successful. It got better by the end, but and I remember I thought about it so much. What could I do? What can I change? And at the end, I just realized it's not really about changing things. Maybe you have to change yourself because you are not in Germany. It's just a different deal here, a different way of life. And I think that's also the key to be successful. And I kind of realized, okay, success here means not really to win the game. It's more like to reach the players and kind of grow as a team. That was my idea by the end of the process.
We also have the thing, for example, in New Zealand, we have like high school sport, and like you play for your school, and like that's such a big difference compared to, for example, here in Europe, where you basically go, you just a lot of schools don't have teams, like you have to pay for a club. And I always see that as a downfall, because I think that one of the greatest things you can do is to play for your school, and because you're at your school, you're playing exactly with those people that you go to school with every single day, and these people, you've grown up with these people, and you have something in common. You have that common foundation, and I think commonality is something that that obviously is something that builds purpose. But what it also does is it allows for people of different backgrounds and different ideas and different ideologies and thought processes to connect under one purpose. And when you play for your school, no matter where you come from, whether you are, like the school that I went to was a very small school, and we had a total of like 300 pupils, and so we didn't have a lot of guys to choose from for our rugby team, for example. But like in my second to last year at school, the rugby team from my school was ranked in the top 10 in New Zealand. And the reason was because these kids, every single kid came from a farm pretty much, so they grew up, they had a work ethic. They understood that it wasn't all about talent. It was about, hard work. And, we beat some teams that we had no right to beat. Honestly, we had no right to beat them. But we beat them because we just had belief. We trusted each other. We played together. We played for each other. We played for our little town. We played for our little school, and we ended up beating some of the biggest teams in New Zealand. Like we were giant killers that year, and it was really quite an amazing situation. But it also shows, like, for example, like the following year, for example, we just got smashed because a lot of the senior players left. And so all of a sudden we're a very young team. We're a very young team playing again. So that just shows the vulnerability of how a team can be incredible one year, and then the following year, based on where you live, it can end up being just a shadow of itself, the following year. But we still maintain that pride in the jersey, even though like the first year, as I said, like we went. I think we went 16-1, so we won 16, we lost 1 game, and then the next year I think we lost 15 and won 1. I think so. It was it's a huge big change, but it was never about that. At the end of the day, like we don't remember the scores, but what we do remember is the bus ride. Remember going to the game, remember the food after. So
this is so good that you mentioned that, because I found myself now, like it's really. Because my team was, I think I had only 3 seniors this year, and we played against a few schools and they had like 11 seniors. So I think physically we were not able to beat them. They kind of smashed us because it was just not really possible for these young players to have that level. Like just the body language is different, obviously. But what I also love, what you just said, is like the away games. Like, for example, took the bus and then we, I don't know, played against Taupo, like took the bus to Taupo, and bus full of crazy students, and all like were so full of energy and I don't know, have a waiata or whatever.
Yep.
And they always said, "Oh, coach, when I score today, can you buy me a Big Mac afterwards?" I was like, "Well, what? Not a Big Mac. You should get some veggies or something, like." But yeah, we went to McDonald's a few times, I remember.
So basically, I think it all comes down, like all what we discussed today pretty much comes down to the connection. And I think that connects quite well to what we talked about before, that with high profile players in soccer, for example, they're moving around quite a bit. They're playing who pays them the most money. So I'm wondering what their connection to the place, to the team, to the legacy in that case is, because it takes time to connect, to feel part of it as well, to understand the legacy of a jersey, of a club, of a place. Being here in the rural region, we have all these very good soccer clubs, but here as well, there is this legacy for these clubs. There are working people, soccer clubs in a way, historically. So when the kids start joining those clubs, they feel really connected. They feel really proud. They feel like they're representing the culture here, the people here. It's a way for them to be seen with their talent or whatever. But then when they grow older and they are successful, then they're kind of leaving that place and going to other places. So I think, is it different in rugby? In a way, yes, but in a way not. You know what I'm getting at? So there's this connection thing, I think, that is really incremental and important to be successful in team sport.
So in rugby, there's two ways you can look at it. Because I think in rugby you generally have I think it's like rugby and soccer have the same sort of upbringing. They have the same sort of basis. You start with a group of friends. You start with a club. You start young. But here's the thing: when it comes down to it, actually really isn't down to the player. It's down to the team. It's down to the administrators. It's down to and it's not necessarily down to the coach, because the idea is that teams are only going to teams will build legacies based on the ability of the people who are connected to the team to ensure that the standards of the team are maintained through the generations. And so what happens often in that situation is that if you don't have a really strong group of supporters, of volunteers, of people who are willing to give up their time to help the club as such, that's not what's going to end up happening. Is that the idea that feeling and that sense of belonging isn't going to be passed down to the new players who are coming into the team. Now, one of the things that I work with specifically is actually sitting down with coaches and sitting down with managers and saying, okay, but here's the thing: at the end of the day, your role obviously is to help the team to be successful. But at the end of the day, the way it's going to be successful is for you to be able to build a team that reflects the values and the ideals of the club as a whole. And so the thing is like, and this is what I'm saying, the idea is like that a player isn't going to celebrate their connection to an old team unless they feel that they have a connection to the old team. Now, how do you do that? The most important thing is also not only to, as I said, like in New Zealand, we have when you come into, in a lot of situations, when you start a new job, you'll have a whole group of people standing up as you bring your whānau into the workplace for the first time, and they will haka you into the room because you're joining their tribe. And and so the idea being that it's recognized as a ceremony. It's recognized as a ritual that you're going to become part of the tribe. And so therefore you don't have to prove yourself. Once you're part of that tribe, you are part of the tribe. So the question comes down to, at the end of the day, what are you going to decide is going to be your commitment and your input to the well-being of the tribe? Now, if players are put in a situation, imagine like in the Bundesliga, for example, if a player came from, say, from Dortmund and then went to Bayern München, and imagine if the Bayern München players actually greeted him in a manner that celebrates the fact that he's chosen to come to their club to make their club stronger and more powerful and better by bringing his experiences and his understanding of the game. Imagine actually ritualizing that every single time that it happens, and then also saying goodbye to them in the same way. Thanking them for their contribution, thanking them, and if you want to get it, because any team that's not doing that now, they're not successfully maintaining their legacy. Because if you do this, then the players, if you say goodbye to a player in a way that is emotional, that is true, that is authentic, and you say to them, this is always going to be your home because you've contributed to who we are as a team. You've contributed by bringing your skills. You've helped us be a better team. They're going to go away, and if they're going to talk about the team, even if they're at another club, they'll have these memories. And if there's a talent, for example, and they say, hey, if they see a talent and they think this talent's going to be an amazing player, they're going to tell their, and they get a chance to talk to their parents or their coaches or whatever. They're going to say, hey, look, my experience with this club was that they took care of me, they supported me. Yeah. So they become an ambassador. And even though they're playing for another team, and even though they might be at a higher level, they're still an ambassador for that team. And that's what promotes legacy. And that's what's missing in sport now. And I think that's one of the things that we have in the All Blacks. That's always about that. It's always about the long-term legacy of the team, but also the well-being of the players when they come into the team in that situation. So celebration, being grateful, but also offering opportunities to connect with like I can give a really quick concrete example. Like so I work with Arsenal Football Club. I've been working with them now for 18 months. And one of the things that I said straight away was the staff, the people that do the sales, like all the tele sales and stuff for the club, have they met the players? No. So why haven't they met the players? Why? They're selling the players. They're selling the crew. They're selling the club. Why haven't they met the players? Why haven't you given them the opportunity to have that one-on-one time to talk with the people that that they're promoting? Yeah, but we can't. No, make it happen. So we actually so basically we had I helped them prepare a day where all the sales staff, all the auxiliary staff, the people who did all the worked at the gates, the people who worked at the concession stands, came to meet the players. Came to had photos taken with the players. Got to talk to them. Brought their families.
It's all about connection.
And what do you think happened after that? Every single, you could just feel how powerful that was, the motivating factor, that they felt they belonged. There was a feeling of belonging, and that's really what it came down to at the end of the day. Is that in any type of situation, if you can get a player to feel that they belonged, they're going to be calm. They're going to feel safe. They're going to be, and when they do that, they're able to contribute at their highest level. And that's what so that's the ultimate aim of any good club, of any good trainer, of any good coach, is to provide that environment where a player can feel like they can contribute and they can be heard.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's getting more and more difficult here in the European market, if you can call it a market. I think in New Zealand, I don't know, I think maybe Maori culture in particular is responsible that there are more values you can't find here in Europe, because you have so many players from different nations, and that alone makes it more difficult to have that belonging. Because I don't know, maybe your home country is in South America, but you play for a club here in Europe. It means at some stage they kind of bought you or, like got you over here. And I think a good example is Lionel Messi. He's one of the best football players in the history of football. And he is from Argentina. And Barcelona, they got him to Spain, I think, when he was just a kid. And he had a disease. He wasn't growing properly, and he needed a lot of like therapy and all that. But Barcelona took care of him. And at some stage, he got better and better and better on the highest level. And so he played there. And at some stage, when Barcelona was kind of broke, they had financially problems. It wasn't clear if they were able to kind of pay him. And he was already like the richest player in history. And then at the end, he decided to leave to Paris. And he had that big press conference and he kind of cried and said, "This is my family, like my father, but now I go." And I just thought, bro, sorry, but I don't believe that, because if this is your family, obviously you can even play for free because you are the richest person already. So why do you leave for even more money? It doesn't make sense for me. And I think these kind of values, it's difficult to find them here. There is one player, for example, at Bayern München, Thomas Müller. Yeah, he might be a good example because he's really rooted in Bavaria. His father is in Bavaria, so he never changed the club. But it's getting more and more difficult to find players like him.
But that's also much more difficult in times when you are well paid from states like Qatar, as you told the examples. So that becomes more a game of money and power of money in sports.
Yeah, but I think also there's two things that need to be. We need to taper that a little bit, because the first thing is that the lifespan of professional sportsmen is very, very short. So like when we look at it, like at us as adults. We have a 25, 30, 35, 40 year working lifespan. Whereas football players generally, or rugby players, you're looking, if you can play 10 years professionally, then you're doing really well. But I still think that even though, like, I agree with you, Marvin, but I also think that there's an option, despite the fact that people come from from different countries and so on. We should be looking at the things that we have in common rather than things that are different. And the thing, like the idea that that we all come from, that we all have families, that we all want to take care of our families, and there's people that are around us that have supported us. That we want to be successful. We want to be able to live our lives in a manner that provides motivation and love. And I think that this is the thing. What it's going to come down to is that I can see teams that focus on building cultural foundations based on commonality. These are the teams that are going to continue and thrive in the future. And going to continue and thrive in the future. And I think that sometimes we forget that as humans that are paid a lot of money to do sport, ultimately they still make that decision, and their decision is based on the long-term financial security of not only them, but also in a lot of their cases when they come from poorer countries, for their families.
Yeah.
And that's what we've got to focus on, is a player. There's so many amazing, fantastic players that are out there who have played, who've gone after the money, just gone after the money the whole time, who ended up burning out because they had no motivation. Their long-term motivation was money, and like, you can't play for money. At the end of the day, you really can't. You have to find a higher purpose. And even with someone like Ronaldo, for example, Ronaldo being in Saudi Arabia now, it's like, my question is like, what is his long-term game? Because I don't think we know what his long game is. I think we know that at the moment, he's making a huge amount of money in Saudi Arabia, but at the end of the day, what is his long game? I'm sure he's got something else going on, and he knows that in order for him to be able to propel himself into into doing other work, whether it's philanthropic or whether it might be, he needs to have this. He needs to have this legacy, and I think that's what he's focusing on, is building that legacy. And I think we're going to be seeing that a lot more. Sports people crossing out of sport into political areas, into environmental areas, climate areas, into areas that have a more of an effect on humankind. And and then if we're thinking about that at the end of the day, that comes right back to the beginning, go right back to the 6-year-old going out on the field on a Saturday morning. What we're doing is we're providing a pathway or a legacy for that 6-year-old to dream.
So all that we're sitting here in this virtual room, I guess we all build like that dream with people, like you with your work, Kane, you, Marv, with your work as a coach, influencing young minds and bringing your experiences from New Zealand as well to Germany, and the other way around, because you're still traveling around a lot. And
but this would be my last question to Marv. Are you a different coach coming back to Germany, or do you just have to switch and say, okay, now I'm here and I work in the same modus as before in Germany? Or can you transport something from the other culture in sports to our culture here?
Well, I say there's always only one version of me. So I'm a learner. I'm a learner. And what I mentioned at the beginning, I learned so much while I was in New Zealand, and I think I learned important values, and it changed really my idea of coaching here in Europe, because it's what I just mentioned, all that pressure for young people, and that's poison for them. They don't need that, but you could potentially ask them from time to time, like something like, how are you, for example, or is there something I can do for you? Because it's not only about football or rugby, you talk to a person, you deal with human. And this is really something I learned in New Zealand. So I'm happy that I have these values now, and I try to share them here as well.
Nice to hear.
So we are two people sharing New Zealand values in Germany now. Good.
Yeah, kapai.
And Kane is heavily nodding. Good. So I guess that was a very interesting talk today, starting off with the loss of the All Blacks, going to the All Blacks legacy, and then looking into sports and transferable skills to Germany, different styles of coaching. I think it was really, really interesting hearing your opinion.
I just want to say one thing. The All Blacks didn't lose. We just ran out of time.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I agree. One more minute and we would have won. Of course. So basically, part of this podcast is also our kupu of the day. So basically, we are teaching Daniel a modern word.
I'm ready.
So do you want to share a kupu of the day with us and maybe give us a bit of explanation what that word means, or if it's out of two parts so people can understand a bit of background to that word?
Sure. Happy to do that. Because we talked so much about sports today, I think it might be good to share two words. Two words I really like. The first one is quite helpful for coaching, and it's karafua. And karafua means something like give it heaps. So you can potentially use it to motivate people in a changing room or also on the pitch. And I really like that word, karafua. So give it heaps. Karafua.
Okay, karafua.
Yes, that kapai sounds good to me. And the second word is papatakaro. And papatakaro means something like playground, but you could also say pitch or sports field. So papatakaro.
Papatakaro.
Kapai.
Okay.
And if I'm not mistaken, Papa, does that come from Papatuanuku? Probably the land that we're standing on. Yeah. So as well in there we're seeing lots of how do you say it? I guess like lots of history and connection to the land and the place that you stand on.
Yeah, when you learn Te Reo Maori, it's not only learning the language, you learn about the culture at the same time, I always say.
Yeah. So Kane, what's your word?
What's my word?
Yeah.
I learned so much today.
Yes.
So, oh goodness me. So, Daniel, your word is kapo or pango?
Please repeat.
Kapo
Kapo
or
or
pango?
pango.
Kapo or pango?
Kapo or
And that means the All Blacks.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, that's important. It's very. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
I've
much.
learned so much.
Yeah.
We've learned so much.
Yeah.
About the whole sports, about the culture, about your work. I think both of you have to tell so much interesting stories. So it seems like it wouldn't be the last time that you are a guest in our podcast. This was only just the beginning.
Ja. Also für unsere Zuhörer, Kane wird auf jeden Fall nochmal auch kommen für ein Special für Hacker und alles, was dazugehört. Und Marv werden wir auf jeden Fall auch noch einladen, wenn wir mal über Tereo sprechen und die Sprache und das Erlernen der Sprache. Und wir freuen uns schon auf viele neue Folgen und wir hoffen, euch hat es gefallen.
Ja, ich kann mich dem nur anschließen. Ich glaube, wir haben heute wirklich eine Menge mitbekommen. Ich finde, wenn wir es ganz kurz zusammenfassen, unheimlich spannend zu hören, dass halt die Mentalität dort einfach eine ganz andere ist. Dieser Nicht-Leistungsdruck, sondern einfach viel mehr Freude dran zu haben, das Ganze auch viel mehr ins Leben zu integrieren, den Sport, auch verschiedene Sportarten und vielleicht mal ein bisschen weniger auch nur an den Erfolg zu denken und an die Kohle, sage ich mal ganz offen. Ja, ist eine Sache, die spannend ist, die wir vielleicht ein bisschen mehr gebrauchen könnten. Insofern auch schön, dass der Marvin da so ein gewisser Botschafter jetzt bei uns auch schon ist. Und Kane auf seine Art und Weise sicherlich auch. Also auch nochmal auf Deutsch ganz herzlichen Dank, dass ihr dabei wart. Und damit verabschieden wir uns für heute. Das war eine lange Folge, aber es war eine sehr spannende Folge und wir hoffen, euch hat es auch Spaß gemacht. Bleibt uns treu hier bei Whakarongo, liked uns, empfiehlt uns weiter und wir sagen alle zusammen
Kakite.
Kakite.
Kakite Homa.
Kakite.
Whakarongo, dein Neuseeland-Podcast.